Hello, friends. Welcome to the Nope Coach podcast. I'm your host, Suzanne Culberg, joined today by Mark. And once again, I didn't ask to say your surname, so I'm going to take a stab because people love this now. It's going to be bad. Struczewski? How do I say it, Mark? I've never been right this far. How do I say it?
Struczewski. The CZEW is pronounced like the game of chess.
Oh, see, I butcher everything. I blame the Aussie accent. It gets me off the hook all the time.
Oh, there you go. Blame. Yeah. Don't take responsibility. God forbid if you do that.
No, that's no fun. I could just, shuffle it to someone else. And today we're talking about turning setbacks into opportunities for growth. So there we go. That was just a setback right at the beginning.
Did you grow from it though?
Probably not, because to this day, I'm 400 and something episodes in, and I never remember to ask the person how to say their surname. I always clarify the first name. Yours was easy, Mark. Like, that's all good. I didn't need to ask you before we hit record. But for whatever reason, the surname never occurs to me. So that's a lesson. Or maybe that's just half the fun now.
You know what's funny is every foreign podcast I'm on means outside the United States, you call it surname. Here in America, we have to be different. We call it last name, which is bizarre. We have to be different.
I'd never noticed that before.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys call all sorts of things different. I went to the States for the first time in June this year, and I said something or rather about thongs, and everyone gave me like this horrified look. I said, I'll get my thongs on and go to the pool. And anyway, I was like, long story short, flip-flops, people. Flip-flops. They're called thongs here. Or if you go somewhere, I went to a restaurant and I ordered a burger and chips. And anyway, they gave me the burger and I thought, well, where are my chips? And I took a bite and it was crunchy, and they put like potato chips onto the burger. I was like, what is this? Anyway, it's like, you guys call them fries, which I knew, but sometimes when you're there, you just, because here everything is chips. There's hot chips, there's potato chips. Anyway, I digress. Where would you like to start, Mark? Because you've got a massive entrepreneurial journey. When you sent me a message, I loved how you said that you were 59 years young, feeling 40. And I was like, well, I'm 40, so we're practically the same age. And you've got a podcast with over 1,300 episodes. So that in and of itself is incredible. Where would you like to start?
Well, I'd like to let people know that I do not have a $100 million Spotify contract. I'm not Joe Rogan, but we were talking before you hit record. We do podcasting unlike most other people. We do it for fun. A lot of people are out there, they're trying to make, get a $100 million Spotify contract. They're doing it for the wrong reasons. And when we had that conversation, I knew we were going to have a great conversation, because we're doing it because you get one shot at this thing called life. Let's have fun. Let's have a boatload of fun instead of being so. I hate those professorial podcasts. They're like really sterile. I don't listen to them. They're too boring.
Pedantic. My husband listens to this one show. I can't remember what it is. He loves history. So he listens to all sorts of history podcasts. One of them is entertaining. It's these two guys. They're so filthy. I can't stand history, but they're hilarious. And they bring modern day nuances into it. So they're like, oh, this is like the Real Housewives of ancient Rome. And I just laugh so hard. But there's this other one he listens to, speaking of professorial, I can't even say that word. She has no change to her voice, and she obviously reads a script, and he puts it in the car. I shit you not, within 5 minutes, myself and my two kids asleep. So when we do like long car rides, and he's like, here you go, have a nice nap. But I'm like, how can you listen to this? She sounds like Siri reading a podcast.
Oh, speaking of Siri, do you have an iPhone?
Yes.
I got to ask you, what is the accent of your Siri?
I don't know. I assume it's Australian, because Siri, the lady who reads it, is Australian.
That's interesting.
And her name's Karen. Did you know that? I find that hilarious. The person who voiced Siri, her name is Karen.
Okay. Well, the reason why I ask is because I don't have an American Siri. I go back and forth between Australia and British. The one I really want, which is not available, is Kiwi. So I settle for Australian or England. I have friends over in England who use an American Siri because they already hear their own accent. They want something different. So I just thought that would be a fascinating question to ask you on your own show.
Well, speaking of the Siri, it's funny you should say that. One of the local radio shows, they were doing some sort of segment about Siri. And anyway, this person phoned in, who was Karen, who actually is the voice of Siri. And they were like, are you having a lend or whatever? And then she's like, no, actually, my name's Karen, and I voiced Siri. And they said, how long did you take? And she said, I think over 70 hours or 100 hours of recording to get all the voice nuances for this thing. And they're like, how much did you get paid for that? And she's like, I'm not at liberty to share that information.
I heard it was zero. I bet it was zero. Someone did a report where they actually took her voice without her permission and made it in the series. That's what I heard. I don't know if that's true or not. So she may not be getting paid by Apple like we think she is.
Well, that's a good point too. It's with the uptake of AI and things just being able to be lifted and stuff. That's a whole other point. But back to the shows, podcasting, doing it as a labor of love, or with anything. I think if you go into something with, I want to be the next Joe Rogan, or I'm not going to settle for less than a $1 million or a 6-figure deal or a sign up, and like nobody knows your name and nobody's glad you came, you're going to be bitterly disappointed when you kick off with something. And also, I think he was saying, how many podcasts end before they reach 10 episodes? Do you know the percentage of that?
It's close to 90% of them, because I believe people get in and they expect a lot of money, or they expect multi-million downloads, which doesn't happen because nobody knows who the flip you are. When you start a podcast, you're Jane Doe or John Doe, or I don't know what the equivalent in Australia is. Nobody knows who you are. So why would you think you're going to have a lot of downloads? My first podcast back on July 7th, 2017, 25 downloads. And I said to myself, I downloaded the episode and my wife did. Who are these other 23 people? So I looked at it from the positive side. I'm like, who's downloading my podcast? I thought it was the coolest thing. But a lot of people they launch their first podcast, like, oh, just 25 podcast downloads. 25. Imagine a school classroom. There's like 25 students in there. Imagine talking to 25 people, but people are not happy with 25. They want 2,500, 25 million, which is not realistic.
But also, too, as you said, imagine that's a classroom with people. If you were standing on a stage and there was 25 people in front of you, that'd be incredible.
Mm-hmm.
If you stood on a stage and there was 25,000 people in front of you, chances are you would run to the nearest bathroom, or maybe that's just me. But because it's like online, and I think also, too, what people don't realize in the day of social media, if you post something on Facebook, Instagram, it has a half-life of like 3 hours. Like it's forgotten, it's lost. You post a podcast, people can still find that years later. I still have people reaching out from podcasters I guested on in 2020. It's like 4 years ago. And they are still getting found. And to them, when someone listens to something that you've created, to them, it's brand new. To them, it was done today. Whereas you're like, oh, I don't even remember that episode. But I think, people expect instant success. And also they spend a lot of money that they don't necessarily need to spend. So this is actually my second podcast. My first podcast, I went the, traditional way, the way I was told to do it. I hired a podcast manager, and I'm not knocking. If those of you listening to the show, if you're a podcast manager, you have a place in the world, and I love that what you do. But sometimes you spend a lot of money on something you haven't even tested yet. You don't know if you like, and is it really even needed? So the podcast manager, they edited my episodes, they wrote show notes, they made me a jingle and an intro and an outro, and I felt very profesh, which is Australian for professional. And launched it all out there, as you said, waiting for, I didn't expect a multi-million-dollar contract or whatever, but it's kind of like, oh, and I didn't get no downloads, and I was more like you, like, wow, people have found this. But also I think because it's talked up, start a podcast, get, fame and fortune. And it's like, you still got to actually promote, like anything. None of these are secret shortcut ways. The same as writing a book. Or, creating a website. You can have the most beautiful website, but if you've got no traffic going to it, it doesn't matter how pretty it is.
100%.
So how would you suggest for people who are perhaps starting out or pivoting or in business who aren't getting the traction that they hope? They're in that setback stage of, I thought the podcast, the website, the book would be the answer, and now it's not. How could they shift, their mindset or shift this into an opportunity?
It's going to seem advice that sounds weird, but I want the listener to give me the benefit of the doubt. I want you to stop, and I want you to step back, get yourself a blank, imagine this a notebook, go someplace quiet. Don't be on your phone. Just get a piece of paper, your favorite beverage. Now, if it's alcoholic, don't get drunk, and just allow yourself to just write about what you're passionate about, what lights you up. I tell people that our subconscious mind, I believe, has recorded everything we've ever said, thought, and did our entire lives. There's probably things way, 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 way buried in the dusty attic of our subconscious mind that you forgot about, but lights you up. And if you give yourself 90 to 120 minutes, preferably outdoors at a park where you're all alone, and just start writing, those ideas are going to start to get uncovered. And I tell people who actually will do the exercise, most people go, oh, that sounds nice, but they won't do it. But if you're going to do it, I have to give you a warning. When you first start writing, you're going to start writing a lot. And all of a sudden, you're going to think that you're done, but you're not. Okay. This is where the magic happens. You have to wait. You may wait a minute. You may wait 10 minutes. You may wait 45 minutes. But then all of a sudden, you're going to start getting these ideas that are way, way, way back in your subconscious mind. And you're going to start thinking, oh my gosh, I haven't thought about this in years. That is where the gold is. But most people, like, we live in a microwave society. I don't want to just tell me what I should be doing. I can't tell you what you should be doing. I don't know who you are. But most people don't want to do that exercise. They were in a hurry to go from one thing to the next thing, and then we're like, I'm not happy. Well, yeah, because you're not stopping to figure out what will make you happy. So if you're going to be in a hurry and you're miserable, here's an idea: slow down.
I love that so much. I'm thinking, channel your inner tween. I have 2 tweens in the house. You can't tell me what to do. And then
Boys or
suddenly
girls?
one of each. And now I'm an
Oh,
adult and I'm like, I want you to tell me exactly what to do in step-by-step format. You know what I mean? But when you're young and you have these ideas, you don't want others' input. You don't want people telling you why you can or cannot do it or how it's impossible or whatever. You're just like, watch me. And then suddenly you get to a point where you're like, I need someone else to give me the exact steps and the exact pro forma. And I wonder, I'd love your take on this. Sometimes for me, I think it's because then I have someone else to blame. Like at the beginning of the show, I blame my Aussie accent on butchering your name. Like if I follow Mark's exact steps to this and then I don't get the result, well, it's Mark's fault, not mine. Because Mark gave me the exact steps. And it just so happens that Instagram, Facebook, wherever you look, there's some flashy person with a blueprint promising you this instant success. So it's easy to absolve yourself of that personal responsibility and follow this thing, which inside you might not even feel good. Like I look at some of these things and it's like, I couldn't think of anything worse than cold DMing people. It's an immediate no for me. But in the past, we've been like, but if that's what's told I need to do, then I'll have a crack. And then I'm like, yeah. And then it's true. I don't like doing this.
For me, oddly enough, you mentioned the cold DMs. I dreaded it too until someone explained to me how to do it correctly. Here's a hint: don't pitch people, okay? Don't pitch people, just be of value. So I hired a coach. They told me how to DM people properly. Now it's no longer stressful because now I understand what I'm doing, okay? A lot of people, when they DM, either they won't because they're scared, or they're just buy my course, listen to my podcast, get my newsletter. And people are like, I don't even know who you are, and you're already pitching me. So that's the number one thing. But there are certain things I don't do. For example, I'm a professional speaker. And I was working from home since 2005 when my corporate job fired my butt. And I was a speaker. When I first became a speaker, I always wore a suit. I freaking hate suits. And one day I was watching a Gary Vaynerchuk keynote speaker, and he's wearing sneakers and a jeans and a t-shirt. And I'm like, I want to wear sneakers, jeans, and a t-shirt. So I started telling people I don't wear suits anymore. And you know what they told me, Suzanne?
They said, thank goodness, it's about time.
They said, who cares? We're not buying your clothes. We're not buying your wardrobe. We want what's between your ears. And I was wearing suits all along because somebody told me that's what you're supposed to do. Nobody cared. And so I want people to, now, I wouldn't say I'm going to go up on stage naked. I'm not talking that weird, but I'm saying don't do things because someone told you. Question everything. I learned that from Elon Musk in his book, Walter Isaacson wrote about him. Question everything. So many people, a lot of my clients say, I've always done it this way. Why? "Oh, I don't know." That's the number one response I get from people. I don't know. Why do you want to start a podcast? I don't know. Why do you want to start a YouTube channel? I don't know. Well, here's an idea. Before you start it, figure out your why. Because so many people are doing it because somebody else did it. Now, full disclosure, I started the Mr. Productivity podcast because in 2017, I heard Gary Vaynerchuk say the future is voice and audio. Everyone needs to have a podcast. I went to Google and typed in those fateful words. How do I start a podcast? But then I actually started the podcast, and I'm not at 10 episodes. I'm well over 1,300 episodes because I took what he said and put it to action. Most people hear something, they get all excited. And you know this, Suzanne. I get so excited, and then, oh, on to the next thing because they look, squirrel, I'm going to try this. So,
Bright, shiny object syndrome. I never met a shiny object I didn't like. And I think that's the thing, practicing constraints. So for this year, for 2024, for me, my focus has been YouTube. I want to grow my YouTube to 1,000 subscribers. And what's great about practicing constraint is when people go, oh, guess what? Like, you should start a TikTok or get on Threads or whatever it is. Like the latest thing is insert thing here. I'd be like, I'm focusing on YouTube. Like, thanks. That's great. Because otherwise you end up with all these half done or quarter done things that also don't even line up to you. Like TikTok to me, I'm never going to point and dance. Like, just no. And also I don't really like 60 seconds or less. My kids love TikTok. And sometimes I look over their shoulder. I'm like, how can you watch this? It just changes so fast and rapidly. And there's this whole thing of somebody's playing with slime on one side and somebody's doing something unrelated on the other side. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, you know, I'm not wanting to be an influencer. I think that's the thing too. Like sometimes people, it's like, what is your business about? Back to your why. I'm a coach. If I make some money passively through YouTube and that, excellent. But I don't need 100,000 subscribers and a gold play button or whatever it is. Because my kids are like, when are you going to get your play button? And I'm like, you know, what is your content about? What are you trying to do? Like, there's a lady I work with, Laura Gates Lupton. We are collaborating on a networking venture, Networking Without Schmooze with Laura and Suze. Anyway, she doesn't even have a website. She has a successful business and she has no website and no interest in ever making one. She's like, because websites are like boats, holes in the water you throw money at. Like from her point of view, you spend a lot of time tinkering, playing around with your brand colors and your fonts and which text is going to convert and whatever. She has like Substack, so she has an email and she has her own podcast. And then she sells. People are like, well, how do you sell without a website? Through Google Doc. She has a Google Doc with an Acuity link and it works for her. And I think back to your point of sitting down, taking that 90 minutes to 2 hours and tuning in with what works for you, what you enjoy, why you're doing this in the first place. Because if you're putting on a suit or making a website or doing something because someone told you that you had to do it, but it makes you want to die inside or you don't enjoy it, then your essence, like the part of you that people are attracted to, gets lost in something that's unrelated.
I will tell you something that's going to shock a lot of your audience. A couple of weeks ago, I decided to delete my accounts for Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. And when I tell people that, they're like, oh, what? And they're freaking out. I'm like, I never got a single lead, never got even so much as an email sign up. So my number one platform is LinkedIn. My favorite social media platform is Snapchat. Yes, I'm a 59-year young solopreneur. I love Snapchat. And I got a lot of friends on there who are really like professionals on Snapchat. And then I have X only because X is free speech. But the other ones I just got rid of because they were taking up my time. I was getting no return on investment on it. And so I do have a website, but I was on Kajabi for a while and I was paying them like $1 billion a year. And I'm like, I was getting no ROI. So I went back to a plain old WordPress website. I bought a theme that gave me lifetime access. I'll never have to buy a theme again. And my wife is my partner. And if I go and want to screw around with the font, she goes, what are you doing? Because my website's not for me. So the website's where I can send people to, but I'm kind of a person, I'd rather be a guest on a podcast. I have my own show. I'm really big on LinkedIn. And I think we need to pick where we want to grow and focus there. Too many people are like, oh, I got to be on Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp and Threads and TikTok and X and YouTube and Snapchat and Mastodon and Blue Sky. No, you don't, because number one, you won't be working on your business because you'll be exhausted being everywhere. I just read a book not too long ago about how to grow your podcast. And the book is fairly interesting, but one spot really, really connected with me. He says the best way to promote a podcast is through offline marketing. Because everybody is like, oh, listen to my podcast. They just ignore it now. So what I'm thinking about doing is getting these really high quality, glossy postcards, have a QR code for Apple Podcasts and Spotify, my artwork on there, a little bit about my podcast, and then buying a list of very targeted people here in Houston, Texas, and mailing it to them, because they're probably not going to find out my podcast on social media, but they get this card. How many times you get a postcard about a podcast in your mailbox? Probably never. So I get to like, oh, what is this? And it's not a cheap piece of stock. It's high quality. And like, oh, wow, he's on Apple Podcast. I drive into work in the morning. Boom, I get another listener, which gets in my funnel. Maybe someday it'll be a coach, or a coaching client. So I'm trying to think outside the box. Everybody tries to promote your podcast and social media, which is freaking lazy because everyone's doing it. It's so saturated. So I don't know where I was going with there, Suzanne. I just wanted to riff on that a little bit.
I've got the thread. I love that. And the thing you said about if you're everywhere, like, Instagram, TikTok, WhatsApp, whatever, all the things you listed, to me, it's like now you just have all these places to check your spam because most of the people are just going to be trying to sell you their fake Ray-Bans or their blueprint for success or whatever anyway. So as you said, like, you canceled them all. That's what you were like. You cancel all these things, the audience will be shocked. I'm not really on social media. I still have an Instagram, but it's got a 9 grid. So it's a static post that basically sends people to my website and my YouTube. And I do post reels. So with Instagram, you have the 9 grid, as I said, which is static and doesn't move. And then there's the reels tab. So one of them says, check my latest reels here. Because what I find in terms of promoting my podcast, and I was talking to Mark about this before we hit record, if I hear a reel, like a short section of a podcast, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to hear that entire episode, I will then go find it. And there's one I was telling Mark about from the Diary of a CEO podcast. Basically, the reel goes, if you piss in a cup of water and then you add sugar, the sugar doesn't take away the piss. And I was like, whatever these guys are talking about, I need to hear. And it's a fabulous episode. And so it's finding the way that works for you to share your message that is unique, that isn't everyone else. Because as you said, if you're just posting on your Facebook wall, latest episode, so is everyone else. What is the pull? What is the tag? What is the draw in to actually listen to that? And as you said, if you have a postcard in the mail and it's like high quality or whatever, I was thinking as you were saying that, I don't know how you'd post it though. Maybe if you're going to do a letterbox drop, a bookmark, because I'm an avid reader. So if you did it as a bookmark with a QR code, I'd stick it in whatever book I was reading lately. And then every time I came across it, I'd be like, oh, there's that Mark person again. So I might not get to it the first time, but eventually I would. But how you can be unique rather than how you can be the same as everyone else. Because I think sometimes we're like, well, everyone else is having success, but are they really? Like, you can have a bright, shiny website. Doesn't mean you're making any bloody sales.
Let me tell you something. I believe Pareto's principle, the 80-20 guy, is alive and well. I think it's less than 20%, but most people don't have it figured out. Most people look really good. And I know for a fact they can't pay their rent, can't pay their mortgage, don't know how they're going to put gas in the car. Goodness gracious, how am I going to feed the kids? Do I have to go without my meal? But everyone's scared because Instagram says, oh, all these people are successful. Look at the people who are successful on Instagram, the Kardashians, Call Her Daddy, Joe Rogan, Gary Vaynerchuk, mere human beings like me and you and your listeners. We may get 3 or 4 likes on a post because we don't have Instagram is so saturated. Plus, as a Snapchat fan, I'm pissed that Mark Zuckerberg stole stories because he tried to buy Snapchat. Snapchat told him to F off, and then he stole stories. So that kind of irritates me. That's why I stay on Snapchat. If you want to find me on Snapchat, go to my website. I'll tell you how at the end of the episode, and at the bottom, there's my link there. But I was debating about keeping Instagram, but number one, I have like 650 followers. Most of them are probably fake accounts. I get no love from them. And I'm like, I'm going to focus on LinkedIn because LinkedIn, you got to use your real name. And then Instagram and Snapchat. So I can always go back to Instagram, but when we're recording this on October 14th, I'm in the 30-day, please don't leave us. We really want to keep stealing your data. I mean, we really want to keep you on the platform. So I'm still in that. So November 3rd is when they actually my accounts.
Yeah. But it's
I'm going to
just,
try to hold off and not reactivate my accounts and let them get deleted.
but I don't, as I said, I don't post, I don't DM. It's very clear. It actually says if you read my stuff, don't DM me, I won't respond. And it amazes me how many people will comment on that. Check your others folder or check this. I'm like, if you haven't read my shit, why the hell should I read yours? Like, seriously.
Yes.
But I think people have this fear if I'm not everywhere, if I'm not doing the things that we're supposed to do, because, but as you said, the people who are successful have millions and followers, and and also too, do you really think many of them are posting their shit themselves? No, their team's doing it. Like,
Yep.
I'm a team of me. I'm the CEO, as in the chief everything officer. I do have some
Yes.
website help. But apart from that, it's kind of like I don't have the wherewithal or the capacity or the want to be responding to these things all the time. And then by the time you get on a trend, it's usually on the downward anyway. It's like, I swear, I'm starting a trend with no jingles on my podcast. A number of people have been like, you can do that? Like, you can do whatever you want. It's your show. Some
I
people
do it
get
too. I
so
shared that before we
affronted.
started the show. I just say,
Yeah.
welcome to the podcast. Today I'm interviewing Suzanne, and we just have a conversation. Nobody's listening to all that stuff you paid hundreds of dollars for anyways.
And also, too, the people who tend to get affronted or send messages or whatever, because I also don't edit, are usually the people who are peddling me their service. So the reason that they're affronted or whatever is because, like, it's in direct opposition to their business. I'm not saying that your business doesn't have a place. I'm saying it doesn't have a place here. Like, and I think that's the thing. When we are for something and we're against something else, it doesn't mean it's not a valued service. It's just that I don't value it. I'm trying to think of something like, I think of Roblox. My kids love that game. I couldn't stand it. And some mums, they're like, do you know some mums play Roblox with their kids? I'm like, yeah, I ain't one of them. It's just like
Now,
someone else.
are you
Sorry.
on LinkedIn?
No, I'm not. I was.
Okay.
And I deleted
So I'm
it.
on LinkedIn, and the number one thing I get pitched on, I can bring your podcast to number one on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I block those because no, I want to grow my podcast organically. I don't want it some phone farm out in India that has like a billion phones, because that's cheating. I don't want that wouldn't make me feel good because I didn't earn to get on the charts of Apple or Spotify. I want to earn that. I promise you, when Joe Rogan started, he didn't use any gimmicks, and he was doing it before there were podcast players. He earned where he is now. So many people, you mentioned shortcuts before we started recording. So many people want a shortcut. No, do the work, put in the time, stub your toe, bang your shin, and eventually you'll get to the promised land if you're willing to stick to it long enough. I know a lot of people started podcasts and they quit after 10 episodes because, I don't know, Spotify didn't come calling. You did it for the wrong reasons. It's like when someone wants to be on my show, if they say, how many downloads do you have? Disqualified. Because that tells me you're not doing it for the right reason. You're doing it, oh, does he have a big audience? No, do it because you want to help one person. I believe in the power of one. Help one person. If you help two, great. You help 200, great. But help one person. So if you ask me how many newsletter subscribers I have, how many downloads I have, I said, I'm not interested. I don't care who you are. Because you wouldn't do that with an influencer. You wouldn't say, oh, Gary, oh, how big's your email list? You wouldn't do that. You say, oh my gosh, it's Gary Vaynerchuk. So I believe in treating every one of my guests the same way.
I love that. And it's such a good point. I always get amused. I don't do a lot of summits and stuff because I find they're flash in the pan, but I do some. But summits, for anyone listening, if you're not familiar
You
with
just said doo-doo on your podcast.
I can say shit on my podcast too. A summit is a group of speakers, usually around a topic. At the time of recording this, I'm about to do a Halloween one because I just thought that was cool. Scary. But what happens is they're usually only up for a short period of time and then they're down. So the yield for that isn't great. Like this podcast, people could find it years from now. I like the continuous yield of potential, whereas a summit's like a flash in the pan. But where was I going? What was I making the point with summit? Oh, when you apply to be on a summit, most of them, the first question they ask you is how big's your list? Like how many emails do you have? And it always fascinates me that they never ask what's your open rate. Because as you said, you can buy people in India or other countries, like you can buy stats. There was a podcast recently that sent me messages like, would you like to come on our show? I was like, sure. I usually almost say yes to any request. Then they turned around and wanted me to pay like $1,000 US or something. was like, wait, what? You asked me to come on your show. Now you want me to pay? That's so gross. And they're like, we have 1 million subscribers on YouTube. So out of pure curiosity, Mark, I went and had a look. They did indeed have 1 million subscribers on YouTube.
Wow.
Average 15,000 watches per video. There's next to no comments and hardly any likes. So I'm like, do you buy all of this and then you charge your guests $1,000 an episode and release 1 episode a day? So, because the thing is, it doesn't matter. As you said, it's the power of one. But my curiosity is anybody legit actually watching this? Or is it just like, and there's people who've been like, be featured. I have a list of 50,000. Once I was on something earlier this year. My gut kind of said, don't go on it. But, sometimes I get bright, shiny objects. I was like, oh, a list of 50,000. Cool. All right. And they featured me and I only had 1 subscriber. And people tend to, when they listen to my stuff, they either like me or hate me. But, if I was in front of 50,000 to only have 1 sign up, I was dubious. When I had a look at how they featured me, they also featured 1,000 other people. They don't tell you that. And they literally had Suzanne Culberg, the Nope Coach. So they're like, that was just that. And I was like, that's not featured. That's like a directory. That's just like a listing. So what do they actually mean when they say they're going to feature you? Because so many of these opportunities end up costing you money. And then what does it actually involve and what's in it for you? Or is it how they make their business? Like there's another pet peeve of mine is multi-authored books, because it's like you can be an Amazon bestseller. It's like you can be an Amazon bestseller in a category that only has 2 books sold if it's bizarre enough, like underwater basket weaving or something. So you've spent, upwards of 5,000 US to write a chapter that nobody's going to read in a book that nobody's going to open, so you can call yourself a bestseller.
Yep. Or, what else annoys me? I see this a lot on LinkedIn. I have a top 100 podcast. Now, I'm like you. I go look. And 99% of the time, you're not in the top 200. You just said you're a top 100, not top 100 of the business category, top 100 overall. Well, people like me and you will go check. And when I don't even see you in the top 200, if I know you, I'll call you out on it. I'm like, Suzanne, your LinkedIn profile says top 50 overall podcasts. Oh, no. I mean in India. Well, that's not what it says. So, and I will call my friends out. I will call you out because you're BSing me. So don't BS me. But they're doing it because, first of all, no one cares your podcast. If they don't recognize the name, they don't care. So I don't say top so-and-so podcast, like Listen Notes is the big thing. Like, according to Listen Notes, I don't know how to get this data. I have a top 100% global podcast. I don't know what that means because I'm not on the charts on Spotify or Apple Podcast. So I think it's a BS metric. But everyone talks about, I'm a top 2% listen to those podcasts. Who cares? If they're not listening, it doesn't matter where you rank. So that's why all Joe Rogan's got to do is say, episode 1252, Elon Musk. He didn't do any AI, any special stuff, because he's Joe Rogan. Most of us are not Joe Rogan, and most people are looking for the shortcuts. Stop looking for the shortcuts, because if you would have just spent time doing the work, you probably would have achieved your goal by now.
But that's a great point. And, doubling back to what we were talking about before, and your mention of the power of one, like are you helping one person? Are you connecting with one person? That opportunity where I got listed in front of 50,000 people, which brought me 1 lead, which didn't do anything. I can go and talk to like a friend's podcast who I never ask how many downloads you have, or like none of that stuff matters. I think people overlook the small audiences, because small audiences tend to have a connected following. They're like, I listen to every one of Mark's episodes. I listen to every one of Suzanne's episodes. Like when I did my podcast daily, I remember reaching day 200 and I asked just a thing, has anyone listened to them all? Didn't think anybody would have, because, it's a big commitment. People emailed me, people commented that I've listened to every single one. And it's like they have that connection. They really get to know you, as opposed to this weird spammy million YouTube followers who I, as I said, don't think are legit. Or some, like you might have Joe Rogan on your podcast. Oh my gosh. But everyone just tunes in for Joe Rogan because they recognize the name, but it doesn't actually bring. So if I bring a big name onto my show, that episode will go. But does that bring more to everything else? So I think sometimes we get stuck by a vanity stat, or we get stuck by how many people I'm going to get in front of. but how are you getting in front of them? And also, are you getting in front of people who are actually resonant with your message?
Yes.
And because if you're not, then it's probably just a waste of everybody's time involved.
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the biggest, I hate saying that. I said, you don't know what I'm going to say because I haven't said it yet. In my second year, I was complaining to one of my mentors, my podcasting mentors. I said, name redacted. I said, most of my guests are not promoting my show. When I release it, they're not promoting it. He goes, that's interesting. So he goes, whose show is it? I'm like, well, it's mine. Duh. He goes, and whose show is it whose job is to promote your show? Mine? He goes, yeah. He goes, if the guest does it, great. It's not their job. He said, do you think Gary Vaynerchuk promotes every show he's on? No, but I'm not Gary Vaynerchuk. I didn't say you were Gary Vaynerchuk, he said, but you need to if you're on someone's show or someone's on your show, there should be no expectation of promoting the show. And I've been on shows before where they said, you must promote the show. And I'm like, okay, so after it's done, he goes, you going to promote it? I'm like, no. What are you going to do? Take it off the internet? Well, no. To me, when you say promote, you got to promote the show or I'm going to come punch you in the nose. Then to me, you're in it for the wrong reason. Now, only about 50% of my guests promote the show because I actually tell them in all the reminders, I said, if you promote the show, great, but you don't have to. And people go, my gosh, who does that? Because I don't want you to be forced, air quotes here, forced to do something. I can't force you to promote the show. Okay.
Yeah.
But you don't have TikTok? Go get TikTok and promote the show. You know, so I think it sends the wrong message. So I don't sweat it. It's my job. And that's why I'm thinking about what I said earlier, going offline with my production. I'm thinking about getting some cool shirts for my wife and I to wear with a QR code in the back, something. So when I go other places, I was thinking about getting, I don't know if this is your a video podcast?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a Tumblr. One of my guests got me a long time ago, something high quality with the QR code on here and my artwork on the other side, which then I'm not here yet, but I can like forget this at like parks and stuff like that. So people go, oh, who's this? Because now people go, oh, the Mr. Productivity podcast. Oh, it's got a QR code. Boom. Okay. I have more. And then I get an active listener. Like I was in my Bible study class yesterday and some old lady, I mean, she probably like 75. She goes, oh, I've been listening to your podcast. I'm like, how did you find out my podcast? Well, last week you mentioned it. She's been listening to my podcast only because I happen to mention it in passing. Yes. So we need to start talking about our podcast to other people. What I do when people say, oh, it's the Mr. Productivity podcast, where are you? I said, no. What's your podcast player? What do you mean? Spotify? I will send them a direct link because that's one thing my coach told me. Lower the friction. So now they don't have to go look for it. I just send it directly to them. Like, oh, then they follow. So doing things like that, reducing friction and doing outside the box thinking, that's how my podcast is actually growing faster on Spotify than Apple Podcasts. Because I think Apple Podcasts waited too long. They thought they were going to be king of the hill for so long. And now Spotify is going all in on podcasts and Apple's going, ruh-roh. Well, it's too late now. I love Spotify. It's the way they do it. And you can share stuff. Spotify is stinking awesome. So I just want people, not just podcasts. Don't think that we're just talking podcast. You want to grow your YouTube channel? Here's an idea. Why don't you come up with some, t-shirt or some mugs or something with your QR code for your YouTube channel? It's offline marketing because everyone's doing online marketing. Do offline marketing to get people to go to your YouTube channel. So this is not just for podcasting. People are all focused on social media, which is becoming saturated. And a lot of platforms, if you overly promote, the algorithm pushes it down.
Shadow bans you or whatever people going on about. But I love your point.
If I hand you a coffee mug and say, oh, no, keep it, now it's going to stay in your kitchen counter and your friends come over. Oh, what's this all about? So, yeah, you're growing not as fast, but now you're growing more stably, I believe.
I love that. I love the QR code t-shirt idea you said you and your wife. I saw someone the other day and I love their shirt and I can't remember what it was for, but it was a QR code. And then I was like, do I kind of like serendipity? I'm like, they wouldn't be walking around with the QR code on their shirt if they didn't want you to scan it. And it can become a talking point. But also too, the thing about guests, so you'll get this when this episode gets live. I email my guests, I say, thank you for coming on the show. Here are the links I'd love you to share. You know, if you feel called or if you feel aligned, I have some wording for it. I give them the Apple link, the Spotify link, and the YouTube link. And then I mention, like, my goal is to grow my YouTube. So, you know, I'd love for you to promote it. Like, but it's never a requirement. And I also send them, well, I've only started this recently, so if you're listening to this and you're a previous guest, reels, because I love listening to reels and it draws people in. And since I've been doing reels, I found my listenership has gone up significantly. And so if they feel aligned, and I find people tend to like to share reels because then you've given them some collateral. But anyway, all of this to say, in terms of, I put out a lot of content. I post 3 episodes a week currently. I don't put all of my episodes on my email or on my social media because there's just too many. I don't want my list to be bombarded with, and now she's spoken to Mark, and now she's spoken to Sarah. Some guests get real pissed off. Like, I've had emails from people before going, why didn't you promote my episode like you promoted Martha's? And I'm thinking, if you want to promote your episode, you can do it. Like you said, you know, like it really put me out of the game for a few weeks because I was like, oh, like, you know, what if? But it's never I liked Martha more than you or anything like that. It's that topic is relevant to the newsletter I'm writing today. So sometimes I'll pick an episode from a year ago, 6 months ago, and sometimes it will be today's. But like, my whimsy of how I do my business is what I feel like talking about on the day. I've never been a structured thing, because some people send an episode new on the podcast as an email. I never click on that because if I wanted to listen to your podcast, I would have subscribed to it. I don't need to be told. My email is deliberately distinct content, not on socials, not on my podcast. Sometimes it will link, like I talked more about this here, but that is how I do my business. Because if I open an email and it says new on the blog, new on the podcast, and it just points me to a resource I could already find, it's an unsubscribe from me. I open emails because I like them to be different, not the same shit I could see elsewhere.
You know what I started doing actually just today, because my episodes come out on Mondays. Instead of saying, hey, I had Suzanne on the show, we talked about A, B, C, and D. Here are the lists for Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and whatnot. Now what I do is I take the transcript. I have a Claude AI rewrite it as a readable blog post. I put that in my blog, but now I'm putting that entire blog post in the newsletter. But then at the bottom it says, hey, if you want to listen to the episode, here are the links. So now, without clicking any links, they can get all the information on the episode. Now, it's not, typically my podcast is an hour long. It doesn't have everything in there, but people they start reading it. Oh my gosh, I don't want to listen to the whole episode. Now they can click the link. So I'm giving them the option. You can either read it or you can watch it or listen to it. Instead of just saying, click the link, now you have the option. So I just started doing that today.
It'll be interesting. And with anything, and I think that's the message Mark and I are trying to get across to everyone or anyone who's listening. Test, try it out. And first and foremost, does it feel good for you? Because if it's a chore, like I'm not saying don't do hard work, because we were talking about, you've got to get the reps in, you've got to do the work. But if it's like wearing a suit when I'd much rather wear Skechers, or editing when I'd much rather just, like, me not editing saves me hours, literally hours. And there are some people who are like, oh, but there's pauses or whatever. And I'm like, I like listening to that. When something is so polished and really, really clipped and whatever, I don't like listening to that. But, instead of telling people how they should do their show or their podcast or their book or whatever to make you happy, just go find one that aligns with your values.
Yes. But I got to tell you a little secret. I'm rethinking about keeping my Instagram, because now you got me thinking about the grid of 9.
Yes.
And then, because does the grid show your reels? Or
no,
can
so
you pin 9?
Basically, the 9 grid is static. So I deleted all 400 or 1,000 or however many posts I had. And then I just have the 9 grid. So you can check it out after this. Suzanne Culberg, Instagram, you'll find it. And then the reels tab is the reels from my show. And then when I upload now, it says, do you want to upload it to the Reels grid or the main in the Reels grid? So I just choose the Reels grid. And sometimes I forget and it automatically will go. So I just hit remove from the main grid and it will just stay on the Reels. And then that way, if I want to tag someone or if I want to something like that, like a guest who's been on, I can tag them in the reel, but I don't, like, my 9 grid still stays the same. So that's the only social media use I do. And I still don't do the DMs. I say to people, like, I have the best contact page I've ever seen. Contact page on my website I absolutely love. If you want to send me a message, it's very filtering. You'll know at the first glance whether or not I'm from you. That's the way to get in contact. I'm old school. I like email, and I laugh that I'm old school because when I was a kid, email didn't even exist. So it's like
me too.
One of my clients wants to be a pen pal coach. She's like, I literally want to coach people through letters. And I was like, I think that would be sensational. I miss having a pen pal from when I was a kid. I would so do that. But I think, as you said, thinking outside the box. So as we come up on time, because we could literally talk for hours, but I've got to get my kids to school. Mark, tell the listeners what it is you do and where they can find you and your show.
Well, because I agree with you on the simplicity. I have one website for people. I hate people to say, find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. One website, MrProductivity.com, spelled out Mr. M-I-S-T-E-R, MrProductivity.com. You can find out my podcast there, sign up for my email newsletter, go to my About page, see some quirks about me. It's one thing I put on my About page, like 10 quirks about me. So just go to MrProductivity.com.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.